The faces in the crowds at Freedom Miller High School all blended into each other. A freshman by the name of Gus thought they were all the same. For too long have they stepped over him, manipulated him, laughed at him, and all around hurt him. They were nothing but bullies. Most ignored him, others tried to destroy him, while those who were nice to him were only fake. For all he cared, this whole school could burn up, every possible kid poisoned by an air of ash, the roofs collapsed by the hottest flames, and the faculty buried beneath every single one of their stupid rules and regulations. As Gus walked down the halls to his algebra class, he looked away from all those who were around him. He couldn't stand their glares, their smug condescending attitude. He was at the bottom, and everyone else knew it. As he arrived at room R7, Mr. Donaldson's algebra class, Gus didn't bother faking a smile like he had done every day before. Instead, he walked to his desk, put his face down, his entire face touched by its cold, unclean surface. He wondered why life was so depressing. Why was it so unfair? It wasn't always this way for Gus Blue. There was a time where he wasn't just normal, but even popular and powerful. But not anymore. "Class, may I have your attention?" Mr. Donaldson said as he stood up. "I have some disappointing news." Mr. Donaldson usually was pretty laid back. Today, he was the opposite. His face seemed stern and disappointed. His nose was unrelaxed, while his eyebrows were high above his piercing green eyes that seemed to hide seething rage. Mr. Donaldson paced around all the students in his class. "Cheaters, failures, losers." Mr. Donaldson paused. No one dared to speak. "You sit here in shock, yet you know what I am talking about, Mr. Blue." Mr. Donaldson turned his gaze to Gus, who looked up in shock. Gus didn't cheat, so what could this be about? "If you are so stupid not to understand basic quadratics, you should have come into my office for help, instead of cowardly cheating like a fool." Mr. Donaldson slammed his fist on Gus's desk. "What? I didn't cheat," Gus responded. Mr. Donaldson rolled his eyes. "Yeah, sure." The class laughed in unison. Gus hunched in shame, as Mr. Donaldson turned around in anger. He wasn't the only one to cheat. 3 more of you also did. I have the proof and the receipts. A student named Violet shot out of her desk. "What do you mean 3 of us cheated? Do you have evidence?" Gus was glad that at least someone spoke up against this, though he found it ironic that they only did once everyone else was blamed. If he was the only one to get in trouble, they would have all laughed with glee. Either way, he had no idea why he was being accused of cheating. "I do have evidence. In fact, I can show you the evidence right now." Mr. Donaldson pulled out 4 quizzes off his desk. These 4 quizzes on solving quadratics got 99%. They all got the same question wrong. Question 4. The easiest freaking question. Trent, a football player, raised his hand, so who were the other 3? "You were one." Mr. Donaldson put a tally mark on the board. "Josh, you were 2. A second tally mark was written on the board. "Michael, you're 3. A third tally mark was written across the board. And last, but least, Gus makes 4. Mr. Donaldson writes a 4th tally mark across the board with increased fury. "I didn't," Gus pleaded. "All of you, to detention." Mr. Donaldson stared at the 4 with fury, as he fostered for them to get out of the classroom. Gus reluctantly got up and joined Trent, Josh, and Michael. While Gus held his head low, the other 3 wore smug smiles. As they walked to detention, the trio of delinquents stomped hard on the damp floor of Freedom Miller's hallways. Gus rolled his eyes at the 3 boys. How could he be associated with them? He didn't cheat, so was it a coincidence he was accused, or was it a calculated attempt by some individual to frame him? Gus wondered if Trent, Josh, and Michael were the ones to frame him. They were known for their cruel pranks before, one time pushing a kid down the stairs, causing such brutal injuries. Even Freedom Miller's vain Queen Bee Shannon Porter looked sympathetic. Not only did they do this once, they did again, and again. Even after being countlessly suspended, they didn't stop. Only when Principal Jordan threatened expulsion did they finally stop. Even so, the pranks never really stopped, the three just moved on to new things. On the other hand, Gus was never the target of their pranks. The three vastly preferred physical violence to something like forging a test. Besides, Gus knew none of them would be smart enough to pull something off like that. Gus, Trent, Josh, and Michael arrived at Principal Jordan's office. Principal Jordan was in the middle of what seemed to be an intense meeting with some influential families in the town of Banco Falls, where Freedom Miller High School resided, including the Vingos, Blackfields, DuPonts, Malcos, and Porters, along with Mayor Thomas Clark. Gus knew that unless Freedom Miller suddenly became less corrupt, they would be waiting a while. All four of them took a seat on a lightly cushioned chair. Trent was a wide receiver for Freedom Miller's esteemed football team. He was strong, muscular, and relatively good-looking. He was also an idiot. While he used to be popular, Trent preferred wreaking havoc with Josh and Michael, rather than hanging with his other friends. Soon enough, he was isolated, and if it weren't for his parents' last-ditch effort, he would have been kicked off the football team. Despite all that, he seemed more happy now. Josh was the king of pranks. In third grade, he stole gravy from the school cafeteria, and dumped all over his teacher, Mrs. Frosty. His pranks went from wrong, to evil. Dumping gravy became dumping cement. Other than that, he had a way with bullying people for no reason. His verbal roasts were so deadly because they had a hint of truth. In 7th grade he called an obese girl Moby Dick for the entire year. She ended up leaving the school in tears, while he was expelled. Now he's at Freedom Miller, and he's worse than ever. Michael was always a quiet person. For many years, throughout middle school, everyone, including Gus, assumed he was just a peaceful, timid boy that could do no wrong. The truth was in fact the opposite. Michael met Josh in 6th grade, and they immediately hit it off. As their pranks would continue, Michael remained quiet, but his actions got louder. By the time of their freshman year, Michael was more ruthless than ever, being fully integrated with the other two. The three of them were called the Frogs, and they showed no signs of stopping anytime soon. Only the school could try. Gus felt a tap on his shoulder. "Hey Gus," Trent whispered. "What? Why did you cheat on the test, Gus?" "I didn't cheat. You can't lie to us, Gus," Josh smirked with ill intent. "Now fill up our water bottles in the water fountain." Gus scrunched his face confused. "What? No." Josh leaned forward, his smile widening. "If you don't, we'll tell Principal Jordan that you organized this whole cheating plan, and we'll make sure you're expelled." Trent and Michael nodded. A shiver went down Gus's spine. "I'd recommend listening to Josh," Michael said as he handed Gus his water bottle. Gus had no choice. He collected all of their water bottles and walked towards the hallway. He wasn't technically supposed to leave the principal's office, but considering the meeting was still raging on, he felt he was safe to leave. "By the way, Gus, go to the water fountain on floor 2. I want good, cold water, not the trash near the administration offices," Trent ordered. And so Gus went, not to any water fountain, but to the water fountain. During passing periods, the lines to the fountain would be longer than ones at Costco on its busiest day. The water it sprouted was serene, almost holy to many. Gus almost never went to it, for it was too busy, and he hated passing periods anyway. As he approached the marvel of a water fountain, for the first time he saw it how it truly was. A water fountain. An ordinary water fountain that delivered slightly colder water. It was not magical, it was just stupid. Gus filled their large bottles and went back to Principal Jordan's office. No one had even noticed he was gone. He wasn't completely sure that Trent, Josh, and Michael knew he was gone. When he gave them their water bottles, they simply all said ribbit, ribbit. Gus had heard them say it a million times. That was one reason the three were called the frogs. Other than them, of course, behaving like a group of frogs. Their froggish behavior knew no bounds. They burped in Gus's face, kicked his legs away. They overall just treated him like a fly to eat. "So how has your life been, Gus?" Trent asked. "It sucks, as usual." "Not that you would care," Gus rolled his eyes. Josh laughed. "It wouldn't be so bad if you didn't cheat." "I didn't cheat," Gus yelled. At that moment, Principal Jordan, a tall, balding man with glasses, got done with his meeting. He took a seat at his office, and looked the four boys in the eyes sternly. "Let's be honest, you all know why you're here," said Principal Jordan sternly. Gus stood up. "I don't cheat." "Sit down." Principal Jordan sneered. "Don't try to hide from the truth. You have all done enough of that. If you can't tell, I'm dealing with enough stress already. I don't have the time to deal with some morons who cheat on a quadratic test. You're all freshmen, yet your breath is as fresh as stale, 40-year-old bread. I'm done, and I'm sick of giving you second chances. You're expelled." Gus gasped. He might not care that he was going to leave Freedom Miller High School, but he wanted to leave on his terms. "I didn't cheat, and I can prove it," Gus exclaimed. Principal Jordan scoffs. "Where is said proof?" "I don't have it yet, but I can prove it to you in a week." Principal Jordan sighed. "What a joke. I can prove it. Just give me a week, please." Principal Jordan laughed in disbelief. "Sure, whatever. I literally don't care anymore. If you four come back to me in a week with your stupid evidence, just leave me the hell alone." Gus breathed a sigh of relief. He couldn't believe that worked. "Out of my office, all of you, now." Gus, Trent, Josh, and Michael all left the office. Trent attempted to give Gus a high five, but his hand didn't budge. "Come on, Gus," Trent smiled. "You saved us in there." Gus shook his head. "I wasn't meaning to. Besides, I didn't cheat, but you still did. You all should have gotten expelled." Josh closed his eyes and laughed. "You really think we are smart enough to cheat? I fail my classes, not cheat at them. So you're telling me you guys didn't cheat?" The three shake their heads. "So, you were all framed too," Gus realized. "I guess we were." "Looks like you'll have to figure that out," Josh laughed, as he, Trent, and Michael walked away. Gus was definitely shook. If the frogs didn't cheat, and he didn't cheat, why were they accused of cheating? He had many ideas, but no proof. If he was going to get to the bottom of this, he would have to look deep. Until then, he would have to keep his head held high in school. He walked to his next class, with nothing but the impending doom of expulsion on his mind.